All right, let's go ahead and get started. So, hello, and thank you for joining us this evening. I'm Kathleen Enos, the Alumni Relations Manager for the Bradley Department of Electrical and Computer Engineering at Virginia Tech, and I'm excited to have you all here for our Women in Engineering webinar tonight. So, why this webinar? I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to share some statistics here. So, please let me know if you can't see my screen right here. So this webinar is an important moment to come together and discuss women's incredible impact on a field where they've often been underrepresented. So through there is a historic and well-documented lack of women in STEM fields. The number of women choosing careers in engineering is on the rise. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, in 1970, only 3% of working women in STEM careers were engineers. By 2019, 15% of women were employed in engineering. The National Science Board reports a rise in undergraduate engineering enrollment over the past 10 years, with a 63% increase in full-time undergraduate engineering students between 2006 and 2015. Now, the fall 2024 student census at Virginia Tech showed a promising percentage of women. The percentage of women and URM students for an entering ECE sophomore class have achieved all-time highs. Here at Virginia Tech, we have excellent resources for women to build community and support one another in engineering. From the Society of Women Engineers at Virginia Tech to WECE, Women in Electrical and Computer Engineering, to our Living Learning Community, Hypatia. So let's learn from one another and be inspired by the amazing work happening in engineering. So I'm thrilled to introduce our amazing panel of alumni tonight who will share their experiences and offer valuable insights on navigating the field of engineering as women. So thank you again for being here, and let's get started with this important conversation. So first, I want to introduce you to Sharon Holt, our 2023 ECE Career Achievement Award recipient, earned her BS in electrical engineering in 1986 with extensive global experience in semiconductors, embedded technologies, and intellectual properties. She has held leadership roles at Rambus, Agilent Technologies, and HP. Sharon is the co-founder of Fraser Stewart Ventures and has served on the board of 3 public technology companies. Sharon has also served on the College of Engineering and ECE advisory boards. She strongly supports recruiting and retaining women in electrical engineering and has mentored several throughout her career. So thank you, Sharon, for being here.
Happy to be here. Thanks, Kathleen.
And next, we have Divita Vohra', was Virginia Tech's 2017 Outstanding Senior in Computer Engineering. She is currently a Senior Product Manager at Spotify, where she leads AI infrastructure and tooling to power personalized, responsible, and scalable AI-driven experiences. Previously, she worked at Capital One machine learning platform and has contributed to open source initiatives like Ray and industry standards for responsible AI. She holds an MS in computer science from Georgia Tech and is passionate about mentorship, transparency in AI, and driving impactful, thoughtful innovation.
Thank you. Happy to be part of the conversation today.
Next is Paige Kassalen in the business operation. She's in the business operations manager at Saab. She graduated in 2015 from Virginia Tech with her BS in electrical and electronics engineering. In 2016, Paige was the only American engineer on the ground crew for the first around-the-world solar flight, and in 2017, she made the Forbes 30 Under 30 list. Since then, Paige has shifted her focus to artificial intelligence and data analytics, facilitating an acquisitions of an AI startup, and published over 75 articles on professionalism and tips for women in STEM and emerging leaders for IEEE USA. Paige is one of the first recipients of the Early Career Impact Award, which we'll be giving to her next week. So thank you, Paige.
Yeah, thank you. Excited to be here.
Next, Lynette Wilcox. She's a triple Hokie from Virginia Tech, BS in Electrical Engineering in 2001, MS in Industrial and Systems Engineering, and her Ph.D. in 2016 Industrial and Systems Engineering. She was a lead cybersecurity with Mitra and is a fitness trainer at her own company, Practical Fit. And she is a mother of 3. So thank you all for being here. Really excited for tonight. And we're going to go in and we're going to jump into questions that our students submitted for each of you. Really great questions tonight. So thank you for everyone that submitted them. We're going to start with Sharon. So how have you been able to combine engineering with the business side of the companies you worked at?
Good question. Those of you, if you've taken a look at my background, I've spent actually most of my career kind of more on the business side of all the technology businesses that I've been a part of. And so I would say that combination really has changed over time. The first role I had coming out of school was more of a direct kind of hands-on engineering role. I was a mixed signal circuit designer, which probably seems pretty antiquated given some of the other panelists and those of you students out there, but obviously still an important field today and will be going forward. But I then moved on from there more to the business side, and I did an extreme step first, going directly from engineering out into field sales, which at the time, I remember a lot of people advising me like, you might want to gradually work your way toward there, maybe, go into manufacturing or operations or marketing, and then eventually into sales. And I did not listen to that advice, which turned out to be a great thing. Sales was a great fit for me. And very formative years I spent in that part of it. How I combined when I think about those early sales roles I had, I would say the fact that I had sort of street cred, from being a circuit designer, and I was in a business that sold semiconductor products to customers. And as a salesperson, your job was to understand the customer's application and help get our products designed in, which was the win for us. So certainly having that technical background, I think, helped me a lot. I didn't need to call in for tech support from field applications or other similar functions as much as some of my colleagues did. I was able to do a lot more on my own. And as a woman in particular, I think it enhanced my credibility in the sales function. Later in my career, when I became a sales executive and then running all go-to-market functions in some of the businesses I was a part of, same thing. Obviously I didn't need to be an expert technically in everything, but obviously I needed to know enough to spot BS, and B, again, it was incredibly important to understanding our customers' businesses and figuring out how best, we as a business could be successful engaging with our customers. And from there, I moved into more general management type roles, where I was running the full P&L. And again, I would say the big thing is, being able, I was running the R&D function, though I hadn't in many years, worn that hat, running that along with all the others. Again, the ability to understand, learn quickly, ask the right questions, spot the BS, very important. And now I would say as a board member for these last several years, I sit on boards of companies that I never was in a business like that, during my operational career. And so the ability to be able to learn the technology quickly, learn it enough to know, enough to understand and ask the right questions, enough to judge whether the business is being successful or not. So, that mix has changed over the years as my career has evolved, but I believe that foundation has always been a pretty important part of my success.
It's great. Be able to take all your experiences along your career path. That's wonderful. Now, next, Divita. We have a graduating student who is worried about their future as they graduate. They've been looking for jobs. What's your advice on finding the first job after graduation? This can go for anybody too. Any tips, any words of encouragement?
Yeah, for sure. I can definitely relate. It is a stressful situation to be in, and you feel like a lot hinges on the first role. The advice that I would give is take the pressure off of finding the first perfect job. Your first role, it doesn't need to define your whole career. It's just a starting point. It's a starting point for you to learn and to take those learnings and adapt based off of what you discover about yourself. So focus on finding a place where you have a broad enough space to learn and you feel like you have a good support network where you're going to be challenged and you're going to be surrounded by people that support that growth. So for reference, when I graduated, I took a very different turn. I didn't even apply for any traditional computer engineering roles. I knew that wasn't the direction that I wanted to go in because I didn't really feel like that was the best fit for me longer term. So I started applying to roles in consulting and different rotation programs. I think rotation programs are fantastic for learning what works for you and what you want to do after, you have that initial experience. So I ended up joining Capital One's management rotation program. And from that, I ended up deciding that product was a really, really great fit for me, where I could lead larger scale impact, but also still stay close to the engineering details. So I would say find a first role that gives you that springboard and that foundation to learn as much about yourselves, because the version that you're going to be 10 years from now is going to be so different from who you are right now. So you don't need to find the perfect first role. The second thing that I would say is don't underestimate the power of your story. So when I've interviewed candidates, I've always been drawn to people who can clearly articulate what they care about and how they think, even if their resume isn't full of big name roles. So you might be thinking, I don't have a lot of internship experience. Speak more towards the challenges that you've solved in your life and the passion that you have for the space that you're looking at, because that goes a long way. Ultimately, you're talking to humans, and humans, are emotional creatures. Like we relate to those narratives and those stories. So don't underestimate the power of that narrative. And then finally, don't wait to feel ready. I think a lot of times we look at postings and we're like, that I'm certainly underqualified for that. I don't think men usually say that. I think that's more of a female mentality. So apply before you check every box. Like ask for coffee chats, reach out to people who are doing work that you admire. Those incremental pieces of building those connections, they add up over time. And opportunities come up through natural connection and momentum. So just keep showing up and trust that your path will come into focus and let your passion guide you.
That's wonderful. Great advice. Thank you. Now, Paige, this kind of goes along with that question with interning. How do you think interning with Federal Mogul, Westinghouse Electric Company, and Bayer Material Science set you up for the rest of your career?
Yeah, and I think what Divita just said, especially resonated with me and resonated with the Paige I knew when I was studying at Virginia Tech. But one thing I remember being really focused on as I was studying electrical engineering was getting a job as an electrical engineer. And I thought that was kind of the end goal. But I didn't realize there were so many different aspects about industry that you also have to consider, like what products does your company make? Is it business to business? Is it business to customer? There's just so many different nuances that once you get different experiences, if it's internships or your first job, you start realizing what you're really drawn to. And especially if you get that first job in electrical or computer science, if you get that first job and you start realizing I'm interested in this segment, but my company doesn't have as much room for me to grow there. I could really only be in this one job in that company. Then that just helps you shape your future and where you want to go. So I'd always recommend get a diverse, set of internship experiences, because that's the time where you have a 3-month trial to just learn, and then that can really help, shape your decisions down the road.
Oh, great. Thank you. Um, Lynette, this kind of goes back to Sharon. Sharon has had a very diverse background, not just with engineering. So a student asked, how have you combined your engineering background with your business owner ownership?
Right. Well, as far as combining things, I'm still working on combining them. But obviously, the training that you have as an engineer, truly problem solving, truly being able to innovate, having a business, you really get to understand the different parts. I think in my experience, a lot of the challenge you find, especially like in cybersecurity, is kind of this divide between the business side and the technical or engineering side, where there really needs to be better communication. So I'm hoping to continue to use that to my advantage to be able to, if you will, speak both languages, and understand what matters to business, the different sides of what happens in running a business. And then, of course, engineering, well, I don't know how to do it, then problem solve. So there's a big part in, of course, in running a business where, I mean, I'm a solopreneur, so it's me. And so with that, then who's doing whatever needs to be done? It's me. And so a lot of opportunity for, again, innovation, figuring things out. And so I enjoy the problem solving aspect of it, growing in, constantly learning. So, but I think probably the biggest combination is being able to speak business while I still speak engineering.
Great. And your business,
Okay, yeah, it's a wellness company, so Practically Fit LLC. So I have been a fitness instructor for over 10 years. And I started actually during the pandemic. It's one of those things where I had, time for a hobby. And but I've always been interested in fitness and wanting to do more with it than just, teaching classes. And so I got some certifications for life coaching, health and wellness, just overall coaching certifications as well. And so I wanted to just continue to grow that business. I've always loved mentoring with, women and just, being able to encourage and empower women. So in a technical space, but then also I'm married. I have, three children. So I really interact with women in very different capacities. And so, but the common thread through all is we are all concerned about health and need to be. And so, yeah, so that's where I really wanted to continue to expand and grow that. So I have a wellness company. And so I'm doing work with that right now and figuring out the engineering side.
that's great. I love that. And going back to you, Divita, you like yoga. You were a yoga instructor. Are you still a yoga instructor?
I am a yoga instructor. It is a little bit difficult. Like I have a local studio that I have built a community with, which is really awesome. And sometimes I do subs, like I'll sub in for a yoga teacher. But of course I work a 9 to 5, so it's a little bit challenging to figure out like when I would teach. And I also really enjoy practicing yoga. So it's finding the right balance of how much energy do I have to give to the room today, given that I also have a full-time job. But yoga has been a tool that I've used to stay grounded and to reflect. Like by doing my yoga teacher training, I've picked up habits like journaling regularly, which has given me this lens of introspection that comes in handy amongst a lot of different things. So yeah, I still practice yoga. I teach yoga minimally, but who knows, like the future, what it will bring. But that's kind of the gist of my yoga.
That's great. The nice work-life balance that a student was asking about. Yeah, so now we're going to jump right into a fun question right here. So what is one myth about women in STEM that you would like to debunk once and for all? And this can go to anyone. And to anyone? Should I call someone? So one myth.
I think you should call someone out.
One myth. So
I take a stab and we'll see how this answer goes. But I'm not sure if it's so much a myth, but I remember there were moments where I would get my exam back after, if it was an electricity and magnetism class. And I remember looking at my score and feeling like it wasn't that great. And just looking around the room and seeing people like high-fiving each other and just wondering, what am I doing wrong, right? Why is it everybody is seemingly happy with how they're performing, but somehow I wasn't enough? And I think that you know, looking back, or advice that I give people now is, number one, stop comparing yourself to others, because in reality, you have no idea what their paper said. And then number two, yeah, it's just like, as you're performing or achieving things throughout your career, it's really just looking at your performance. And did you know you put in enough effort? Are you, you know, are you happy with the way you prepared? And if not, then adjust that. But really, the only person you're in the race against is yourself. And yeah, that's the advice I'd give there.
That's wonderful.
I can jump in and add one myth about women in STEM. I think when I was in school, I really had this outdated vision or image in my mind that you needed to be hyper technical and kind of unemotional and maybe even a little detached to really, really thrive in engineering. Obviously, that is not true. I've learned a lot about what it means to be an engineer since. But I really initially thought that if you bring creativity and empathy into the room, it means that you're not serious enough. But I've since learned that those qualities aren't weaknesses, they're actually superpowers, especially as you grow in your career. Some of the most important engineering work that's happening today, like especially in spaces like AI, requires a deep amount of emotional intelligence and empathy and interdisciplinary thinking, and an ability to really connect with human needs. So I think one myth that I'd like to debunk is that we shouldn't need to feel like we need to conform ourselves to fit this version or this image of the field that we might have. We should be reshaping the field to reflect the richness of who we are and all of the emotional capacity that we have as human beings.
Great.
Yeah, I want to share a little bit with that too. I think that's awesome, Divita. I attended a conference, and it was like a women's, you know, had the women's event ahead of time. It was like industrial control systems. And one of the things that a lot of these ladies were saying, well, you know, you don't have to be as technical, and, you know, kind of, you know, saying that, which I wholeheartedly agree with. At the same time, I want to dispel the myth that you can't be. You absolutely can be as dig deep and competitively, technically as the guys. And so not to shy away from it. And as well, just like Paige said, don't get into comparison to other people. If you love electronics, if you grew up, you know, fixing cars or fixing electrical things with either of your parents, then then power to you, like rock on and do the thing. So I just, you know, I was surprised that a group of women were kind of leaving the other end, again, to Davita's point, the full spectrum. You absolutely can kick butt technically. So
Girls can get dirty too. We can get a
yeah.
And
That's
Sharon,
awesome. I'm going to take a little different turn on this,
Yeah.
because those were all great responses. I grew up in a family of 6 kids, and I had 3 sisters and 2 brothers. My dad was a scientist at Bell Labs, so, you know, my dad was very technical. One of my older sisters, 4 years ahead of me, you know, was a computer scientist. But it was very funny when I was going through the selection process for, you know, schools and majors. My dad was scratching his head. I mean, I was always really good at math and science, so he wasn't worried about that. But he's like, you know, he's like, you worry so much about hair and makeup and clothes. I don't think that's what engineers are like. And I remember going through this argument with my dad, and one of my older brothers used to like to go to Radio Shack and buy components and build things in his room. And he had all and I was never like that. And I think in my dad's mind, he really thought, well, if you're not doing that, you shouldn't be studying engineering. And I remember arguing with him, because I liked to do that anyway, and telling him, well, we're not all the same. You know, there's more than one way to be an engineer. And later, you know, several years into my career, when I was having a lot of success, I remember, you know, he and I talking about it, and he was like, well, you were right.
Yeah, this
So Not all
Yeah.
engineers don't come in one shape or size or look or feel.
That's a great story. It's true. You have this one image of how someone is supposed to be in one career or in one path. So,
Yep.
um, uh, but how has being a woman shaped your engineering journey, whether academically or professionally? And this can be for anyone too.
I'll jump in. You know, in some ways profoundly and others not, probably like everyone on this panel, even though, I graduated from Virginia Tech almost 40 years ago. You'd like to think that things have changed a lot. But Kathleen, when you shared some of that data earlier, it's changed, but not as much as we probably all would have liked to have seen over the years,
So,
right? So I would say, how has being a woman shaped, myself as an engineer or later a technology executive? I guess for one, you get used to, working in a room of men, and that starts in college, even in your undergraduate years, and obviously continues into your career. I think I would definitely say that while I had challenges that I think some of my male peers didn't have because of being looked at and maybe judged ahead of time, um, I also think I had some advantages. I really do think, and I talked about this a little bit earlier when I was talking about my career progression. I think the fact that I was able to surprise people a lot at college, as well as throughout my career, worked to my advantage in some ways, and I'm very cognizant of that. On the other hand, yeah, did I get underestimated a lot? Did people make assumptions about me? Absolutely. But, I think probably all of us here on this panel and many of the folks who are participating in this session, you get thick skin, you get tough because you are dealing with that from day one. And I hope that things will continue to progress. But again, things haven't changed a lot, although I'm sure I have some horror stories that I hope some of the younger panelists would not have experienced in their career. And if anyone asks about those later, I'll be happy to share some because they're always good for a laugh. But I would like to continue to see more change.
Yeah. We had an event for a building that was knocked down at Virginia Tech. A lot of this alumni came, and a lot of the women were saying they were the only ones in the class, in the engineering class. And so how do you deal with that? With we talked about this a little bit when we met last week. Have you ever struggled with imposter syndrome? You being the only woman in an engineering class, should I be here? um how do you talk yourself out of that? How do you get that confidence? And
Yeah, I can take a stab. So as Kathleen mentioned, my first job out of college was really working as the only American engineer on the first solar powered airplane to fly around the world. And so, within that, I was the only American, so there was a language barrier. I was the only female engineer on the team, so of course, representing women in STEM, and then also just a 22-year-old woman. Kind of gaining exposure to the workforce. But one thing I remember a lot of times I would get frustrated or get down on myself for something. And I would just pause and take a step back and say, do I think that there's anyone else here that could be handling this situation better or navigating this issue better? And I always came back to the answer of no, because I really feel like I'm going to bet on myself. I know I'm not going to give up. I know I'm going to be resilient. I know I'm going to try as hard as I can not to drop the ball. And I think just that aspect is how I've really gotten over imposter syndrome in different scenarios. And of course, I have it every single day. Today, I was in a meeting wondering, oh, am I doing enough? But just taking that step back and saying, would I bet on anyone else to be more successful here? And when you can say nope, and that you're willing to push through until the job's done, then I think that's the best way to overcome it.
Yeah, +1 to Paige. I think oftentimes we don't realize how amazing we are and we're kind of in our own heads, and no one is as critical as we are of ourselves, and that can be helpful, but that can also be something that we need to check. The way that I kind of remind myself that I'm meant to be here is by focusing on the purpose of why I'm doing what I'm doing. I'm very impact oriented, especially in the space of AI. I know that I have a voice to bring to the table and that diverse perspectives really matter. So even if I'm maybe if I'm missing something from the conversation or I have a gap in my knowledge, I know that I can make up for it. And I know that I'm going to be driven by those values and the purpose that I have in terms of why I'm doing what I'm doing. So I let that guide me. I also lean into the power of community. When I was at Virginia Tech, I had two friends in all of my classes, and we just banded together and we helped each other out so much to the point that we joke that we have like a joint degree. Obviously, that's not the case. We did everything with integrity, but we were, with each other through all of those tough moments, and that just made it so much easier. So lean into the power of your community. There are people that are going through the same thing as you that might be feeling imposter syndrome just like you. And when you can talk through that and help each other in a safe environment, you realize that, okay, I'm not the only one going through this.
Yeah, I wanted to echo that as well. The community piece, that was exactly what I was going to say as well. Like, I personally struggled and would not have made it. And it took me a while, even till after graduation, before I regained confidence. But I had peers that I went through with. I was all over the SEED, every program that was available. I was in back when like the pre-college program was called Aspire. And I had friends that, to Divita's point, that went through with me. I'm still friends with them today. And we, since, had families and careers and all that kind of stuff, but definitely community with peers. And then I don't know if again, Mary Taylor Brewer is in the room, but as far as an advisor is concerned, I would not have made it without her. So again, somebody who could see a whole lot of grades, who really could assure me that I was doing fine. And then, yeah, once I got to the end, though, I really did struggle with like a sense of belonging and really seeing myself in an electrical engineering job, which was part of my decision to switch to industrial and systems engineering. But it wasn't necessarily, I would say at that point, the woman thing, as opposed to, the degree, the degree didn't fit what I really wanted. So I really wanted more people in my engineering path, and ISE offered that. And so had I known sooner, I might have switched sooner, but at the same time, I was proud of myself for finishing something. Again, electrical engineer is a really hard degree. I often, people do see the combination of electrical and industrial, and when Sharon was talking about, street cred, and some places it's tech cred. Like, oh, okay, you have electrical engineering degree. Okay, then you can rock with us. So yeah, but community, power of community, and mentors, absolutely.
So looking back at your younger self when, in school, what do you wish you could have told yourself? If any?
Two things, even just based off of what I just said. First, if it doesn't fit you, it's okay to change. Sometimes people change majors. That's okay.
Yeah.
But either way, you're still capable of doing the work and capable of doing the degrees. And if there are things you don't understand, advocate for yourself and seek understanding. But just really understanding that it's worth the ask to make sure that you understand you have a right. I have a right to be there, and a right to learn, and a right to have communications with me that are what I need in order to be successful. And a quick note, I did mention, or Kathleen mentioned, I have 3 children, and one of them is an engineer. And so I'm really proud of her. She's in college for engineering. She's in mechanical engineering. And so I've had the actual opportunity to personally let somebody else know that they're absolutely outstanding and worthy to be there. But, advocate, and then continue to tell yourself, you're supposed to be here. You're worth it.
No, that's wonderful. Great.
I think I would add, Kathleen, and I think Paige mentioned something about this earlier, but you don't need to be so hung up on this degree and this job, and there's only one path forward. I think you've heard from everyone on this panel, everybody has sort of branched out, but the important foundation you get in terms of critical thinking and problem solving and innovation with whether it's electrical or computer engineering, or frankly, any engineering discipline, is a great foundation for wherever you want to take it. So don't limit yourself in your thinking about where your career can take you, and don't be afraid to try new things, even if they're not exactly, on the path that you thought you wanted to take when you started out.
That's great. And that kind of leads to the next question is, how do you manage burnout or recharge when you're juggling technical demands and personal goals?
Yeah, I could go first. So one thing that I've been reflecting a lot on is the fact that it's okay for your goals to change as you're getting more information, getting more experience. I know that, the page I was whenever I graduated from Virginia Tech, I thought I was going to hit certain milestones or do certain things, and realizing now that I know more about the industry and the world, that my career goals might have shifted slightly, and that's okay. And I'm not betraying myself. I'm just taking in more information and making the best decision with that information I have. So I'm not making any drastic career changes with that, but I think it's just really important. And Sharon was saying this too. It's important to be honest with yourself and really understand, where do you want your career to go? Because the career's the journey, it's a marathon, and we spend 8 hours a day there every day. So why do something that you're not passionate about? Just be honest with yourself, and you cannot make the wrong decision if you're listening to your heart and you're listening to your gut.
So what drove your decision to change a direction in your career, to not reinvent yourself or just shift your career path?
Yeah, I mean, for me, for example, I started as an electrical engineer working on a solar powered airplane, and I knew that there were certain types of skills that I really, wanted to develop. And even when I was looking at being a future leader, I never really gravitated to wanting to be the CTO of something, but I thought more of the chief operating officer role would align and blend the technical skill set and also some of my other business skills I've picked up along the way. And so at the startup that I worked right before Saab, that was my final role there, the chief operating officer. And I think that if I would have, taken that 22-year-old Paige, as I mentioned, and said, no, you studied engineering when you were 18 years old, you have to be an engineer for the rest of your career, I might have missed out on that experience. And it was really in line with my passions. And now I feel like I have this new trajectory that I can go and grow in.
Sharon, I know that you have mentored a lot of women in their engineering career. And what would you say to them that when they don't see themselves as leaders in the engineering field? What encouragement would you give them?
It's interesting. First of all, and this might not be what everybody would expect me to say. When I think about women I've worked with, and by the way, men too, my comments now are not exclusive to women, because I've mentored a lot of men over the years as well. But, not everybody, first of all, wants to be the same kind of leader, right? And there's different ways of being a leader. Sometimes, I mean, in my corporate experiences, sometimes some of the most valuable people are high-level individual contributors who are very, very, very good at what they do, very good at working with others across the organization. They don't want to manage a bunch of people, and they know who they are. When I think about some of the most valuable people to some of the businesses I've been associated with, that's a very important profile. And there's a certain type of person that kind of gravitates toward that. Although I find sometimes earlier in their careers, everybody feels like, well, I've got to, I want to rise up the management rank in whatever function or area I'm in. And that maybe isn't the right answer for everybody. So I think, being self-aware, and I think it's been mentioned several times here, getting a variety of experiences, whether it's in different businesses or different functions within the same business. I know for me personally, that was very valuable in the early stages of my career because I did a lot of different things along the way, which just helped me to grow and grow. I give that advice all the time, which is don't be afraid to, move from a R&D role to a manufacturing role or to a marketing role or a sales role, or move from, when I worked at HP, a good friend of mine left the semiconductor business and went to the high performance computing business, and his career went on from there. I mean, there's getting diversity of experiences early helps you kind of figure out what sort of leader you are and go from there.
Just keep evolving in the technical fields and keep going. That's great. And one thing that's really important, we mentioned, having a great mentor, but networking, not just professionally, but, meaningfully. So how do you approach networking to find that great support group?
Yeah, one of the things that I try to keep perspective in is more long-term. So you're building relationships. So as you have opportunity to interact with people, how could this become a relationship? So where it's not just something that you can get from people. Sometimes people can get that mindset of going in and just thinking, what can I get? But always being prepared to have something to offer. And I thought about this too, because one thing I can, or at least I used to be, but I definitely have moments where I feel shy, like especially if I'm going into a room, like a networking opportunity where there's, again, a whole bunch of new people, is to have something like, read an article or of something, and then you have something with you to begin to spark conversation, something that was of interest to you. Just a quick tip to, have something ready to talk about that's of interest, which can also help you make a valuable connection where someone has something in common with you or common interest, which can give you a good basis for, again, something long-term interaction. And then make sure that you follow up. That's key, follow up.
Yeah, one thing. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I think of networking as not transactional, but more as relationship building and over time. So I try to lead with curiosity. I try to approach people that I genuinely think are awesome, and I ask, like, what does this person care about? What can I learn from them? Can we connect around a shared vision or set of values that we have? So some of the most meaningful connections that I've made weren't about jobs or finding a role. It was about ideas and shared missions and building that relationship over time. And yeah, networking doesn't just pay off from one interaction. I think that's important to understand. It's built through small, consistent touch points, and you have to lead with authenticity. I think people can really tell when you're just, talking to them for a role. But if you lead with like a genuine curiosity and a desire to connect with that person and understand their journey, that actually goes a long way. So just be your authentic self when you're talking to people. It really, really makes a difference.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. And one thing I just wanted to add about networking that I remember taking me a bit of time to transition into was growing up, you're really used to people giving you advice, and everyone's older or an adult and you're learning. So you just take their advice and know that they're, helping you. But one thing that I've learned, going into my career is that a lot of people love to give advice. You're going to get so much advice in your career, and you don't have to take all of it. So people are going to want to tell you exactly what you should do. And it's kind of a hard transition to say, no, that's not where I want to go in my career, or I don't think that's going to benefit me long term. And being confident and comfortable saying that, you don't have to necessarily say that to people, but I remember struggling internally. People are telling me to do this, but I'm passionate about this. So that's just something to look out for.
Great. So you're getting all this advice, but when you feel like you want to kind of go off, like on a project or a decision that is a risk, that pays off. Do you have an example of just kind of going on your own and saying, you know what, this is what I feel is right, and I'm gonna do this?
One of the biggest risks that I took was transitioning from the larger space of digital product management into machine learning product management without a formal background in ML. So I had a background in computer engineering, but I didn't know what a hyperparameter was. Like, I didn't know all of these terms that all these ML people knew, but I decided to bet on myself and take a role that required a deep ML understanding, because I knew I would learn on the job, and I trusted myself to learn from the failures that I would inevitably have. And that really, really made a difference. I was quite bullish on trying to specialize in ML because I saw the impact that it would have on the world, and that bet paid off. So just believing in myself, realizing that I don't actually need to have this knowledge in order to do the job. I have to have the foundation of problem solving and grit and resilience that Virginia Tech, going through the engineering program, inevitably gave me. That was enough to just immerse myself in a field that I didn't know a lot about and come out thriving. And I did stumble, I did fail, but those failures taught me so much that, has led to where I am today. So bet on your curiosity, and it will almost always be worth it.
Great. I want to go back to Sharon.
I wanted to add a little bit to that too.
Oh, yeah.
Just the concept of trusting yourself. So there is a Evie Pomporis has a book called Bulletproof, and I saw her on a podcast, but really, just to quickly break down, her point was like, if you're making a big decision, trust the gut that you have. And I think that's a big deal for, I guess, for women in particular, to really just know that your voice matters, that internal voice, that gut instinct to go a direction or to make a shift, to trust it. And again, yeah, back to what Divita said, the training and the experience that you've had at Tech, you have enough to take in many directions. And so trust your gut.
Your gut. I like that. So Sharon, going back to, your career and now serving on boards, what have those positions kind of taught you, or you learned from being in their leadership roles, and you're working with a lot of different people? And
the hardest transition for most people, going from being, I mean, most people who sit on boards were some kind of high-level executive, and going from being someone who probably maybe a little bit of a control freak, kind of in control of your domain when you're either running a company or running a division or whatever, to sitting on a board is a really interesting and difficult transition for some people to make. I mean, your role as a board member is to kind of oversee strategy, oversee kind of the health and the execution that the management team is leading through. You're in charge of hiring and firing the CEO, and you're looking out for the interests of all of the shareholders. And yet you do not roll up your sleeves and do the blocking and tackling every day. So you're kind of sitting up here looking at the company from a bit of a distance. You've got to dig in to learn so you understand enough about what's going on, but you can't directly control anything but for a few of those high-level levers that I talked about. And that's a tough transition to make. So there's definitely a learning that goes on when you get to the point in your career where you're sitting on boards. And I've been doing it for, I guess, about 9 years now. So I'm getting better at it. I just joined a new board recently, And that's another challenge. It's a quantum computing company, so it's a new space for me. I've been involved in high performance computing before, but quantum is something different, and how it is going to play in the long run. And so I'm learning a lot. I'm obviously learning the folks on the management team, learning who's who do I think is good, not good, and kind of learning about the technology and the market all at once. So I'm drinking from the fire hose, but it's good for me.
No, that's great. Like we were talking before, how you just keep evolving and learning all the new. I mean, there's just so much advancement, there's rapid evolving technology and just trying to keep up with everything. Um, so looking back, what do you see as success? It doesn't have to be, being in a big role or whatnot. What do you see as, okay, I feel successful in my career?
Well, I'll start, and everyone else can think for a little bit. When I look, and I'm at a different point in my career than the other esteemed ladies on this panel. When I look at it, I feel like, I had a really interesting career. I worked with some great people, interesting technologies. I always felt like I was challenged and learning and growing in different ways throughout my career. And at the same time, I had a very full life. I mentioned earlier, I come from a big family, therefore you can imagine I have a very large extended family. I have been married for almost 35 years. I have 2 children. I am a grandmother. And I had a crazy busy career all the while doing all of that. And no, you can't have it all. You make choices along the way. But I felt like I was in control of those choices, and I felt like I did a pretty good job balancing in a way that worked for me. And when I look back on my career from where I am now, I don't just look at the career, but I look at the career in the context of the fuller life I have. And I think I did a damn good job.
No, that's amazing. You have an amazing career. Everyone should connect with Sharon on LinkedIn. Well, connect with everybody on here on LinkedIn. You all have just amazing career. You guys are great mentors, great, just absolute heroes for students, and we really appreciate it. Um, and I cannot believe it's almost 7 o'clock. So this has been a lot. This has been, beyond enjoyable. I've learned a lot. And I would like, before we go, I would love for each of you, we've talked all about, the advice and that you would give, but what's one advice or something to think about for those that are on here tonight, as they go along their career path, and maybe they have doubts. Do they, a lot of women, they don't continue in engineering. If they're having those doubts, what would you give to them? What advice would you tell them?
When I first graduated, success meant that I was technically sharp, I was climbing the ladder quickly, and that I could hang in any room. But over time, that definition has really softened and deepened for me. So success to me looks like that I'm doing work that is aligned with my values and that empowers others and that stretches me creatively. So I would say prioritize impact over ego. This space has a ton of potential in the future, and it's actually such an amazing time to join this field. Like, there's so much cool stuff happening. So just ask yourself, am I building something that matters? Am I building something that aligns with my values? And at the end of the day, when you look back on your career, an arbitrary title or things on your resume won't matter, but you will see the impact of what you've built. And I think that will go a long way. So just let that lead you, and work on creating the future and the world that you want to be a part of, and you have a lot more agency than you think.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, Divita, I love that. And I would add to that just I guess the way to be practical about it is, and write things down. So as you have different experiences, like again, you don't have to be good at everything. You're going to learn along the way, learn what you like and don't like. You know, she mentioned journaling as well. I'm a proponent of journaling, like every job, not just what you did, but keeping track of the impact you had, keeping track of different skills that are transferable, and understand like you're at a place now, but as we see the world today, so much changes. And so just be prepared for changes, but know what you value, as she said, know what you value and what is going to be important to you. And I like how, again, Sharon put together the whole picture of not just the career, but look at your whole life. What is it that you want out of your life? And keeping track of that whole thing. So, because I'm at the age where my memory is like, what are we doing? And so I highly recommend writing it down and keeping track of it. And it's okay to make mistakes, learn from them, write them down, keep track of them, but always end with how great you are. Always remember that too. So.
Wonderful.
I would say don't be afraid to use your voice. So, especially when you're adding diversity to the room that you're in, people want to hear your diverse perspective. That is extremely valuable. And a lot of times, especially because right now at Virginia Tech, you're exposed to the latest and greatest technology, you probably will know more about some new technology than a lot of people in the room. So, don't be shy, use your voice. And the second piece to that, no one's gonna just tap you on the shoulder and say, hey, it's now time to be a leader. You should just step into that role. And I think using your voice is the easiest way to do that.
Great. Well, thank you all so much for tonight. You've all been, I think this was just absolutely wonderful, very inspiring. And, you know, I want to thank the students and the faculty for joining us too tonight. And I know that this was inspiring for me, and I'm not in the engineering field. So, you know, I'm not in the trenches like you guys. And this is just, it's just inspiring no matter what field you're in, to be strong, to believe in yourself and have that confidence. So I really appreciate it. So thank you all for tonight.
Thank you, Kathleen. And I just
Yeah,
want to
thank you
say
for
I'm
organizing.
super impressed by my fellow alum.
Oh, I'm
Likewise. Thank you for organizing it all.
oh, thank you. Everyone have a good evening. Thank you.